Wow. $500 billion on Christmas every year, just in America. And if we would use just 1% of that, we could build, what did it say, 400,000 churches? Every person in the world could have a fresh cup of water. The things that we could do if we just would look at maybe doing our habits a little differently. In fact, let me ask you, what was your favorite Christmas gift from last year? What was you think back a year ago, what was your favorite gift? I don't know how much she cost. I gotta tell you, if I think back a year ago, it takes a little bit to remember any of the gifts, and a little bit of work to figure out, what was my favorite. What was your second favorite? Your third? Your fourth? You probably got a few, and yet here we are, just a few months down the road, and so much of what happened last year is forgotten, except maybe the memories, except maybe time with family. Except maybe how you felt, or the spirit around Christmas when that right song came on the radio, or you were able to find a little gap of time that you could just sit down and get out of the chaos and just enjoy something together. A memory that we're beginning to build is just to take the grandkids downtown and ride the carriage, and the horse-drawn carriage, and maybe go get some hot cocoa at Starbucks, some of that kind of stuff. The fact that we can just spend time together. And we're just suggesting that perhaps Christmas gift giving and what we spend and how much effort we put into Christmas has gotten just a little bit out of hand. And so just for fun, if you'd like some ideas, and maybe this is really just kind of shows us some wild ideas, I got some expensive Christmas gifts for you to consider. This is just kind of for fun, but the first one on here is a titanium motorcycle for $106,000. So if you're looking for your next ride, there you go. Or here some of you ladies might want to pick up the J brand leather jeans for $1,000. That's a little more reasonable. This isn't even an expensive bottle, but here's a Moet Leopard champagne at $5,000 a bottle. Not even aged. Okay, now, for any TV lover, here's the Ultimate Outdoor Theater. It's an outdoor 201-inch LED television that emerges from a discrete underground cache, telescoping upward and then unfolds. It's got the highest resolution TV that you can get at the time at a cost of $1.5 million. You could get that bad boy. Here's the first self-propelled suitcase for $1,300. For the traveler out there. And the last one, although it's pretty beautiful, the J.H. Miller grandfather clock only set you back $29,000. So there you go. There's some shopping ideas for you if you're still out there looking. But it's a little crazy, right? Probably not. Any of those probably not in the realm of what we're going to be doing this Christmas season. And we might shake our head and think, man, I can't believe that anyone would spend that wildly, that would, go to those kind of lengths, would just be, behave like that, and be so reckless. And yet we recognize there's something in the human heart that can make us feel restless and unsatisfied and always wanting more and more and more. Now, did anybody eat too much on Thanksgiving last week? All right, got a couple honest. All right. How many in here today, we'll even ask the question, okay, how many today even made some kind of plan of preparation to eat too much? You knew it was coming, and so you kind of got ready for it, like maybe you ate a little less during the week because you're getting ready for Thanksgiving. Or you're going to hit the gym Friday morning and you figure, okay, I'm going to splurge on Thanksgiving and then I'll deal with it next week. Maybe you carefully chose the right pair of pants to wear on Thanksgiving so they had a little bit of capacity to them. They could stretch some during the meal. I mean, we even prepare for our excesses. And we have a tendency towards excess, a tendency to overdo it, a tendency to maybe take a little bit more than we did. And probably there's no other American experience that celebrates the kind of intemperance than Christmas, right? It's the only holiday that gets a whole month to celebrate. Plus, it starts the day after Thanksgiving, so really it gets over a month. It's the only holiday that we probably completely redesign, redecorate, move around the furniture in our home to make room for all the new stuff for Christmas. We repainted part of our living room blue, so that meant we needed all new blue decorations for Christmas this year to match the decor. See, I'm really learning a lot as I'm talking about it. Many people go into debt just trying to pay for Christmas. All those gifts that we really don't need, a lot of it goes on the credit card to get it anyways. When was the last Christmas, as we think of kind of about all this, I was thinking, I had this down too. If you think of it, it seemed to me like holiday, it's one of the only holidays, and there's some of this in all the holidays, but when you look at the excess, Christmas has its own food group, its own music, its own clothing style, its own movie genre, its own greeting card section, its own kind of games, its own, the Christmas trees, the decorations, the parties. I mean, what other holiday do we celebrate like we do Christmas? We kind of just go nuts. And we asked the question last week, does it ever feel like perhaps Christmas has gotten a little out of hand? In fact, think back. Think about last Christmas, or how far do you have to go back till you can remember a time when it just felt like at Christmas everything fell into place like it should. Everything just kind of aligned. The season was just right. And you were able to enjoy it. You were able to kind of accomplish the things you wanted to because of Christmas. Christmas was, everything fell in line. It was just at least as ideal as possible. How far do you have to go back to remember a Christmas like that? Maybe it's been a while since Christmas felt like that. Well, we probably should not be hoping for Christmas to change anytime soon if we want to look to the culture to help us change it. If we want to look for, our American experience to help us kind of get Christmas back in line, or help us to slow down a little bit, or help the chaos and the craziness to change a little bit. If you want to get back to a time, a season, a year where everything about Christmas became just right again, it's probably because you made a choice to make Christmas a little different. Instead of waiting for everybody else to get on board with how we could change things. Because like you, I've noticed there's an ample supply of commercials inundating us with images of people ripping over the open packages, and the kids get so excited, and it just looks so wonderful, and you can purchase joy down at the local department store. That if you just get the popular toy, your children are going to be happy. They're going to love you. You're going to give them the best Christmas ever. I mean, right? That's kind of the message of the season. If you get the right gift, life's going to be better. It'll be complete. It'll make you happy. That's really what Christmas is about. And we see it everywhere. But we have new challenges these days. There's a twist on all this Christmas pressure. I mean, families go nuts. And we have to reciprocate. There's this implied duty of doing what everybody else is doing. Or there's other little things, maybe things we don't always notice or think about, and yet they're probably just as real. I mean, there's messages kind of coming out there in subtle ways saying, you know what, get out, spend money on Christmas because we got to keep this economy moving forward. That's how we're going to do it. We got to spend. And there's pressure. Christmas spending helps provide jobs. Parents can feel obligated to shower their children with extravagant gifts because that's what the neighbors are doing, or that's what their childhood was like growing up. We talked about this morning. I don't want to rob my kids of a Christmas that I had when I was young. I mean, we have a variety of different pressures that say to us that Christmas is supposed to be like it is. And that's why we're asking you to join a conspiracy. We're calling this the Advent Conspiracy. This isn't my word. It's not our, as a church, it's not our idea. We're joining with others that came up with this thought and have for the last few years saying, maybe Christmas could start being a little different. But to do it, we're going to need to join up. We're going to need to sign up and get on the program, because a conspiracy, by definition, is a group of people that are joined together to plot against in a way that's illegal or creates a subversive act. Now, we're not asking anyone to do anything illegal. But we are conspiring towards the rebellious, even the revolutionary commitments that might change the culture and move it in a new direction. That's why we have an upside-down Christmas tree in the back. Did anybody notice? Only a couple people asked. Okay, only a few hands. Check it out on your way out. The girls did a great job on that. But we wanted to just kind of throw that back there and just see if anybody noticed. And wondered, what is up with this upside-down Christmas tree? What did you guys do? We're trying to go against the norm, go against the flow, go against the culture, and invite you, challenge you even to join a true conspiracy. Because that's what it's going to take if we're going to change the way things are. But what's interesting is this is not the first time that the Christmas event we celebrate was about a conspiracy. Far from it. We're joining a conspiracy that began thousands of years ago and was designed from the beginning to go against the grain of the culture so that God could do something new in the land in which He wanted to effect. So I want to take you this morning to continuing our story in Luke chapter 2. And we're going to pick up our reading in the first verse. Last week we looked at Luke 1 and talked about Mary's song and how she worshiped God fully. Her heart, her soul, her understanding of who God was and what God was doing amongst them, the fulfillments of prophecies and the coming of the Messiah. I mean, it's all that was just growing and leaping in her heart. She worshiped God, and we're encouraging you to worship God. I loved in our reading this morning, this is maybe the piece that spoke to me, and I know God can speak to each of us in different ways, but the piece that spoke to me is what they read a phrase that said something like, in your house I can find rest. And that just spoke to me this morning. I love finding rest in the house of the Lord. Because this last week was really busy, and it was really tough, and I had to face some really difficult challenges. So much so that I didn't even get it all done, and starting tomorrow, I got to move into all the leftover stuff I haven't dealt with yet. And I know for others, you've come in this morning, and you're struggling because you don't know how you're going to pay the bills this month. You're struggling because you don't know how you're going to keep up with everything. You're struggling because it got really cold, and now that's created a whole new set of circumstances and problems and issues to deal with. Or maybe, it's a job issue for you. I know that some have gathered here this morning and there's a huge medical issue going on in your life or in your family. And isn't it so good to get out of all of that for just a little while and come into a house of rest? Come into a place where we can slow down. Come into a place where we can kind of get out of the grind and get out of the trial, and we can just worship our God because we know He helps us and guides us along the way. Well, we can do that because God came to us. And in Luke chapter 2, beginning with verse 1, it says, "In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This is the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. And everyone went to their own town to register." Oh, we got our scriptures back there? Verse 3. "And everyone went to their own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth to Galilee, to Judea, to Bethlehem in the town of David, because he belonged to the house and the line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in clothes and placed him in the manger, because there was no guest room available for them." I imagine that we find this story and those words just kind of so wonderful and comforting today. The story is so familiar to us. We read it every year. We share it with our families. We're talking about taking our nativity with our kids in our community group and maybe recreating the story with the different pieces in the nativity. It's become so familiar to us, though, that we kind of romance this idea of this little baby born to this young couple and how beautiful this was for them and their young beginning family. And they placed Jesus in the manger in the city of Bethlehem. And it's become so familiar, we think of it as something that's just iconic to the Christmas experience. But there are so many other things going on here. There are so many difficult things going on here. So many challenging things going on here. In verse 1, when it says, "In those days, Caesar Augustus," it's talking about the days when the Roman Empire was young and kind of coming together in a new way. It was just being formed. And originally, the Roman Empire was ruled by several generals all throughout the area. And they almost had kind of a civil war going on as different generals were trying to rise up into power. And different areas were trying to build their armies. And there was all this war and all this fighting as they gradually were trying to become more and more powerful. And so what happened is they began to invest their attention and their power into one man that could rise up until finally Gaius Octavius gained control. And the Senate of Rome voted him in, and he took on the name of Caesar and became Caesar Augustus, as it was given to him by the Roman Senate, so that he could become the most powerful man in the world. At this time, the Roman Empire stretched from about Egypt to India. It covered over 1 million square miles, and it included 56 million people. And one man had gained control and rule over all of it. They settled on this title Augustus, which means great or magnificent, but it also seems to have some implications that it's a person that stands with the gods. And this man was the most powerful man on the face of the earth. This rise to power was under the unification of Rome, and it happened in the hopes and the promise of peace. But the problem was that it required everyone to become a slave to the government. So they forced this census. We might feel that way, although we don't exactly have Roman guards roaming the streets and some of their tactics, although they had done this census, and we, like we do today, and they did the census so that they could find out what the family groups were, how much income they had, and they could tax them to develop this emerging Roman government. And so that's why this census was taken. And so Mary and Joseph make this journey up to Bethlehem for the census, and it began to draw for us a picture, an incredible contrast between the different characters of this story. As we kind of look at these two elements, Caesar Augustus in Rome, and then what God is doing as Jesus. And on one hand, you have Rome and all of its glory. And on the other hand, there's Jesus, this little child, born in a manger. In Rome, you have strength, you have power, there's wealth, there's sophistication. With Jesus, he's born to this poor young couple. Rome is massive. It's beginning to spread and cover over the whole world and kind of take over through military might and control. But Jesus is born in the tiny little town of Bethlehem. In fact, almost 700 years earlier, the prophet Micah writes about the birth of the Messiah, and he says, "But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel." Though you're small and insignificant, though you barely have a spot on the map, that's where I'm going to rise up, my Messiah. On one hand, you had Rome, who was wanting to rule the world and take over everything. But on the other hand, Jesus was beginning this quiet rebellion that would change everything, including history itself. In fact, this rebellion was so real that the Gospel of Matthew in chapter 2, verse 16 records to us that when King Herod, who was one of the Roman rulers at the time, he hears just a rumor that a baby had been born that one day might grow up and become the king of Israel, he found that to be such a threat. He was so infuriated by what was going on that he set out the order that all baby boys of Bethlehem, 2 years and younger, and all baby boys in the surrounding areas should be killed. I mean, could you imagine that? I mean, we have a brand new baby boy in our family. Maybe some of you have some young children. And just the threat of a power, a ruler, a new king emerging caused the Roman government to be so afraid that they killed every Israelite boy in the area that was prophesied where he'd be born. These are dangerous times. To go against the Roman government could mean death. And we see that later on in Jesus' life. Jesus wasn't crucified on a cross because he was a good guy. He wasn't crucified on the cross because he taught good things. He wasn't crucified on the cross for all the humanitarian effort he did, or all that he did with his life in teaching about God. They didn't even care if he taught religion. He was crucified on the cross because he claimed to be God. Because he claimed to be the ruler of the hearts of men. This is a very dangerous thing that was going on. In a very dangerous time. As this young rebellion was born and placed in a manger. In verse 7, we're told that Jesus was born and placed in a manger because there was no guest room available for them in the inn. You know, it seems to me that this becomes a bit of an allegory for the rest of Jesus' life and for the rest of the world to consider. There was no room for Jesus at his birth, and the world has struggled in making room for him ever since. In making a place where he could fit, where he could be. As the heart of man has rebelled against God, as the heart of man has rejected the plan of God, the will of God, and wanted to live its own way for its own pride, for mankind's own will and own wants, we have pushed Jesus out continually. And even the holiday that we say celebrates his birth, that we celebrate what he means in a gift to the world, it's easy for us to push Jesus out because the culture asks for so much. What might you do a little different this year in the area of spending less? In realizing that this is a conspiracy that's asking you to change your habits, change your priorities, change your activities, and try to put the focus on the best things, the good things, and the right things. This Christmas, would you give a little bit more to compassion instead of consumption? Would you give a little bit more to worship instead of religion? Don't give Jesus a nod by doing some religious things, but enter into him fully like we talked about last week. Know that he came and he wants to make room in your heart. He wants to have room in your life. He didn't come so that we could have a Christmas holiday. He came to take over the world. Will you use this Christmas to find ways to build relationships instead of materialism? Spend more time with your family and friends than you do buying things for them. Find ways to make relationship the center of the activities that you do. How can you spend time together and be together and share in this story together? One of the great things about Christmas is you can be you can still walk through a mall or go into a bank and you'll hear a gospel song on the radio. Somebody will use the word Christmas. We still see it at different places. The word emerges. I know it's being shoved out. I don't want to get you all riled up about that. But it's a time when there's still this open door of sharing the gospel. There's still an open opportunity to share Jesus and how he's impacted our life. And we can share that story. This is still a place and a time that if we find ways to change our habits, change our activity, and do things a little bit different, maybe we can find a gap. Maybe we can find a breath. Maybe we can find room to tell the story once more. Live this Christmas on mission for Christ. Instead of letting it consume how you live. Spend a little less. Some way, somehow, somewhere. Reserve your finances. Reserve your time. Reserve your energy and your efforts so that you can spend it in a different way. In a holy way. In a gospel way that makes a difference in the world.